Hi, well, we're going to be making this smooth and creamy dressing, and it's without mayonnaise and it's without a high-fat dairy. So you're going to stick around. We are going to use what we call like a little secret ingredient, but I think you're going to want to learn about it because you'll probably find lots of ways to use it. I'm Judy Matusky. I'm a registered dietitian as well as a culinary nutritionist with Athens Nutrition. So we're back again here on Thursdays at 12 p.m. for our, short and sweet Facebook Live cooking demos. Today we're making this creamy, creamless dressing or dip, it's sort of an herby ranch dressing. I think it'll be something that you'll love to have around for the summer. It's light, you can use it in a lot of different ways, and it's so easy to put together. So let's talk first about the secret ingredient, and that is we are using raw cashews. So if any of you have seen, recipes using raw cashews to make cashew milk or to make cashew cream, there's lots of different ways that you can use these because they're a softer, kind of buttery sort of nut, so they're not as hard as a lot of other nuts. That's why they blend up so well into this creamy dressing. This would be kind of a tough thing to do with like almonds or other nuts just because it tends to get a little bit more grainy and you can't quite get it as smooth. So we're gonna use these raw cashews, and we've actually shortened the amount of time it takes to make this dressing thanks to Cooks Illustrated, which is where I first came across this recipe and this little hack of shortening the soaking time for cashews. So the one thing that we need to do with cashews is that you do need to soak them a little bit. They need to absorb, soaking them in water, they need to absorb a little bit of that water so that they soften even more, so that when you go to blend them, they do get really nice and creamy. So what Cooks Illustrated and their test kitchen did is that they found out that if you put the cashews in a blender and sort of get them almost to like a small little pebbly texture, and then add your liquid, you only need to soak them for about 15 minutes, and as opposed to maybe an hour or more, overnight. So I love that little hack. All right, so these are raw cashews. They are not roasted. They are not salted. So that's key. You really don't want roasted cashews for this. It'll just change the texture, and it'll also change the color. So grab some raw cashews, keep them in your freezer. I just had them this morning with my nut mixture. They're really heart healthy. All nuts are higher in fat, but the fat profile of most nuts, if not all, really are the majority of the fat that's coming is a plant unsaturated fat, so that's super heart healthy, as opposed to like our dairy fats that can be a little higher in saturated fat. All right, so let's go ahead and we're gonna get started. The ingredients are pretty minimal. I went ahead and made one ahead of time just so we can finish it because this does take 15 minutes to soak. So let me pull over the blender. Now I have a high power, powered Vitamix. You can make this in any blender. It's just that the amount of time it might take to get the dressing smooth might take a little longer if you're using a blender that doesn't have quite a high power motor. This will blend it up in like no time. So anyway, we're starting with a cup of cashews. And again, feel free to double this recipe if you think you'll be able to use more. The nice thing about this recipe is it does take it holds up pretty well in the refrigerator for at least a week or more. So that's really great. And there's so many different ways you can use it, and we'll talk a little bit about that. All right, so we got it. I just put a cup in here. Now, what you're going to do is, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to want to make this into a little finer, not so fine that it starts to become cashew butter. We don't want that. Just a little pebbly, and I'll do it real quick for you. So give me a second here, and let me just pop this on. Okay, and that's about it. So some of these chunks might be just a little bit bigger. It might go a little bit longer, but if you can see in here, all right, let me just show you real quick. So it's kind of pebbly. So we're just breaking them down. Basically, we're just increasing the surface area so that the nuts will absorb the water a little bit faster, so you don't have to soak them so long. So that's the main tip there. Now, I did try this. Actually, this one that I made this morning ahead of time, I forgot to and this is a lesson, always read your recipes ahead of time. It just makes cooking a lot less frustrating, right? So I hadn't made this in a little while, and I was like, oh, I remember how to make it. So I pulled out my food processor, and I did this step in my food processor, and then I read the recipe, and it specifically says, you really want to use a blender, because food processors and like immersion blenders, they're just not going to get it smooth enough. It's just going to be a little bit grainier. So, you know, read your recipes before you start cooking. But anyways, this one I just put it back in the blender, and I whirled it up a little bit to get it smoother. All right, so now that we have this, so now we're going to add all the ingredients that you need, minus the herbs, which we'll finish with, to the cashews, and then this is going to sit for 15 minutes. So we're going to do that part, and then you're going to pretend that it sat for 15 minutes, and then we're going to, then you'll whirl it up again. All right, so I'm going to follow the recipe. So the amount of water is 3/4 of a cup. All right, and the one thing about this, and I'll pause just real quickly, because if you want to make what's called cashew cream, I don't offhand have the exact ratio between the amount of nuts you need versus the amount of water, but you can look that up. I have it on our judymatusky.com blog. But you would add the water just like this and let it sit, same thing, 15 minutes, and then whirl it. And the amount of water you add will change the thinness or the thickness of whatever you're making. So if you want a cashew cream, which is, not too thin, but not also too thick, then the amount of water you add will allow you to create that. And cashew creams are fabulous as a base, like a really creamy base for pasta sauces, for other kinds of dips, for other kinds of dressings. They're good in dessert. Cashew cream is really good to use in desserts as a non-dairy, healthy fat option for a lot of recipes. So that would be cashew cream. That if you want to make your own cashew milk, you just use a little more water. So you add water to thin it till you get it to that milky texture, and then you have your own homemade cashew milk. And the great thing about doing something like that is that when you drink the cashew milk, you're getting all of the nutrients, all of the fiber, all of the protein, all of the magnesium, all of the list of nutrients that are in cashews, all in that cup of milk or half a cup of milk, because it's blending the entire nut. We're not straining it out, which is what happens when you're drinking almond milk or other nut milks or oat milks. All the good stuff sort of drained out, and you're left with just the liquid, and that's not. And ideally, you kind of want the whole food. All right, so we added our water. Now we're going to finish up. So it takes 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, and you kind of do want apple cider vinegar or a light colored vinegar. You could probably use like a white balsamic as well, but you don't really want like a regular balsamic because it's too dark, and then it really is going to change the look of the dressing, because we want this to be more white than red, or purple. So there's 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, and I think I'm going to do a little Facebook Live on apple cider vinegar pretty soon. There's some really interesting studies coming out about using vinegar in cooking and dressings, or even drinking it, that may help with blood sugar. So I'll maybe bring that to you a little later. All right, so we have the 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. We're going to add a teaspoon of salt, and with dressings you kind of do need the salt. You just do. It just adds a lot more flavor to the dressing. And remember, you're not using that much, so you're not obviously getting all of that. All right, and then it's just a half of a teaspoon of sugar, and I'm just using just regular white sugar. And then we're going to use the powdered alliums. Now I'm just going to pause for a second to talk about this, because typically if you watch my videos, I'm always using fresh as much as possible. So like fresh garlic and fresh shallots and fresh onions. What the test kitchen, like Cooks Illustrated, what they found is for dressings, and I noticed this as well when I use fresh onions or fresh shallots or scallions and garlic, that once you chop the garlic and the onion and the shallot, you are breaking down the cell walls, and that's releasing compounds that make that onion and that garlic sharper. And that's fine if you want that sharper onion garlic flavor when you're cooking, you're using that in maybe with heat. But if it's going to be in something that's going to sit longer, like a dressing, within a day or two, that sharper flavor becomes almost like a harsh flavor. It's not as pleasant. So when they tested doing this recipe, they found that this is a really great time to use your shelf-stable powdered alliums. So I have granulated onion powder, onions. You could use granulated, you could use powder onion. So that's the one we're going to use. And the onion, I think it's a teaspoon of It's a teaspoon of the onion powder. So let me just go ahead and get that in. Let's get this out of here. It's such a big bottle. All right, so we got a teaspoon of onion powder, and I think it says a quarter of a teaspoon of garlic powder, because remember, these powdered herbs are, dried and powdered herbs are pretty intense in flavor too, because they're pretty concentrated, so you don't really need very much, but they are really good to use when you're making dressings, because the dressing lasts longer in the refrigerator that way, and it's a more consistent flavor. Okay, so that was a nice little tip. So we have our sugar, we have our water, we have our vinegar, we have the salt, we have the onion powder, the sugar, the sugar, the garlic powder, and that is it. So all you would do at this point is you're gonna just whip this up, whirl it up a little bit for like, a few seconds. So let me just turn it on. Turn it on here, just to mix it up. All right, that's it. All right, now that's gonna sit just like this in your blender. Set it off to the side, go do whatever you need to do, and then in 15 minutes, you're gonna come back to this, right? And then finish it. And basically finishing it is just another whirl for maybe on low for about a minute, give or take. Then you're gonna wanna turn it up higher, and then another minute or so, just until it gets nice and creamy. And if you can, take a little spoon, you just want all the grains to disappear. So you really want it nice and smoothie. So depending on the power of your blender, it'll depend on how long that might take, but shouldn't take more than a couple minutes to get it to that smoothie texture. All right, so I'm gonna set this aside because I'll let this sit for 15 minutes before I do that next step. And now we're gonna go on to the herbs. So for those of you that follow my videos, that my husband is a fantastic gardener, and we have a beautiful garden, and he has it going, and the herbs are starting to come on, and I am loving this time of the year. I just went out this morning. It was a beautiful day here in Philadelphia. It's fabulous, and I picked some herbs. So I think the recipe calls for chives and parsley, a couple tablespoons fresh. This is you can play with this. Use whatever herbs you have. They're all gonna work fine. So because we have such great ones, I have some basil that I picked, some really nice dill, parsley, we have some chives growing, and my all-time favorite herb is fresh tarragon. So this is a tough one because it's coming on right now, but it is not gonna last very long in our garden. So I'm gonna need to be picking it now and using it. So I am actually using all of these. Why not? And I'm gonna chop them all together. So remember, when you're chopping your herbs, you're kind of just pulling them together in a nice little tight bundle, just to make it easier to chop. I'm gonna chop them. I'll use a couple tablespoons for this dressing, the one that I already, this was the dressing that, and I'll show it to you in a second, that I made earlier, so you can just see it once it's, and then I'll save the rest and I'll add it to my, this dressing that's sitting here. And again, it's a dressing or a dip, so it depends on how thick you want it. You could use a little less water if you wanted it even a little thicker, so you could use it as a dip, but it's a fairly thick consistency as is, with the 3/4 of a cup of water to the cup of nuts. So I don't think you need to necessarily thin it to be able to use it as a dip, but you could. I mean, you don't have to make it thicker, like use less water to use it as a dip, but if you wanted it to be thicker, then just use a little less water. If you want it to be thinner, like just a little thinner dressing, then by all means add a little bit more water. So you can really adjust it. And that's how it is with the cashew cream and the cashew milk. It's all based on how much water you're adding to the volume of nuts that you're using. Okay, so, excuse me. So let me just show you. So that's the thickness. This is still a little bit grainy because, again, I used it in the food processor. I can still kind of see it. So I'll probably have to whirl this a little bit more in the blender. But anyway, so that's the thickness. If you can see, it's thick. It's thick. It's not super thin, but it's also, you can certainly use this as a salad dressing as well as a dip. All right, so I'm going to just throw in here a couple of tablespoons of this chopped herb blend. More is always better in my book. Don't go skimpy on fresh herbs. Add a lot. All right, so I'm gonna mix it around. And now this would be great. Well, I had a salad already made up in the refrigerator from yesterday. So this is great, just drizzled on top of, obviously any kind of a a mixed green salad. Oh my gosh, it was fantastic. It's just like an herby ranch dressing. You can taste it for salt and pepper. You could add a little bit of ground pepper. I think that's the one thing I forgot. You do add some little ground pepper. So, let me just do that right now. I'll put a little bit on top, but you might want to add a little ground pepper to it. So that's your salad. That's your creamy herb dressing. That's cashew cream based, right? That's your base. This would be fantastic. We used in tuna. Like, you can make a great tuna fish salad with this. Add some other vegetables to the tuna fish, and use this instead of mayonnaise and instead of sour cream or whatever else you might use. You could even blend this with a little bit of plain Greek yogurt. That would be good as a dressing. So it would be good like that. It would be good in even like a grain-based salad. Like, I have some quinoa in my refrigerator right now, so I think I'm just going to chop up any vegetables that I have in there and these fresh herbs, and then toss that together to make like a nice little grain-based salad. So lots of ways to use this up. This would be great drizzled over grilled chicken. This would be great drizzled over some grilled or poached salmon. Phenomenal. So when you make it, find ways to use it. I have not tried to freeze it, so I don't know if you can do that or not. I'm going to say probably not. So if you're going to make something like this makes about 2 cups. But yeah, you should be eating lots of salads and you should be eating a lot of vegetables, so you should be able to use it up. This would also be great drizzled on top of roasted vegetables. I had a client that was with me yesterday, and if she's watching, this would be considered one of those flavor bombs, in a sense that you have this sauce already made up and it's in your refrigerator. And if you're doing something simple, like let's just say the weather's so great and you want to throw some fish on the grill, and it's just simple, it's all it is, and you're like, oh, I wish I had some more flavor, then this would be considered what we call like a flavor bomb. So this would be your sauce, your go-to to finish that salmon, so it's nice and it has sort of elevates the flavor, right, and gives it a little bit more punch. All right, so give this a try. As always, let me know how it goes. I'd love your feedback. I will not be seeing you next week. No, actually, I think I will. I'm going to actually be in the mountains at my cabin, but I think I'm going to try to do a Facebook Live next week, and I think it's going to be chicken-based. So I promised that I was going to do chicken tenders last week. Things changed. I wasn't able to get on Facebook Live. But I think what I'm going to do is spend the month of June doing some different chicken dishes, and I'll bring those chicken tenders back, and I'll do those as a Facebook Live. So next week, I'm going to be at my cabin, but I am going to see if I can sneak in a Facebook Live next Thursday at 12. So be on the lookout, and I think we'll talk a little bit about chicken and some easy ways to do it for the summer, okay? All right, stay well, enjoy this weather. I hope you can get outside. I plan to do that this afternoon. All right, I will see you next week. And remember, cooking is a very powerful health behavior, so please get in your kitchen and enjoy it and make it fun. All right, I'll see you next week.